everyone. This is our webinar, Easter Seals of Southeastern Pennsylvania, sponsoring our PBIS Introduction Training for Families. So my name is Danielle Francini-Muir. I'm a board-certified behavior analyst, and I oversee our behavior supports department at Easter Seals. I also have two wonderful moderators on with me today. I'm going to show you guys real quick. We have Brianna, give us a little wave, and Niquetta. They are behavior specialists out of our Delaware County and Philadelphia division. So they are going to be helping out with our chat and Q&A today. I'm gonna put on our ground rules. So if you've never been in a Zoom webinar, it's a little different than a regular Zoom. Participants don't have audio or video capabilities. So you can communicate with us via the chat or the Q&A feature. Okay, so just know that your name will be shown in both the Q&A and chat if you choose to put them in there. However, you can make it anonymous if you want. Okay, please, we're just asking that because this is being recorded, that you don't share any identifying information about your child. Okay, this is a safe space, judgment-free zone. There is no silly questions. Ask away, please. There will be two opportunities kind of scheduled throughout the presentation where I will answer live the questions from the Q&A. We are able to also send links and resources to the chat, so check in there as well. And I will share all of this information with everyone who attended the recordings and the resources either later today or tomorrow. Okay, so, there's me. So I gave you a little intro already, but I am a behavior analyst. I've been working in the field of education and behavior analysis for almost 20 years. But I'm also a mom. So there are my two kids. I have Joey. He's making his little cheesy face. He is 6 years old, and I have a daughter who is about 15 months. So I use a lot of personal experiences in my training and support because even though I do have, training obviously in the field and experience in the field, a lot of my, what I've learned is through applying those, that context with my own kids. So I'll use them a lot as examples as we go through the training today. Some National Center resources for you guys, and I do have a resource page at the end as well. But the Center for the, Social Emotional Foundations for Early Learning, that's the CEFL resources. They can be found at vanderbilt.edu. And also the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. They have a ton of really great family-friendly resources. If you're looking for some more information on positive behavior supports, they have social stories, visual supports, so great websites to explore for additional information. Some of the content you're going to see today is taken from the Center for the Social and Emotional Foundations for Early Learning, their parent training modules. So here's our little agenda. We're going to talk about what is PBIS, talk about what it means in preschools. We're going to talk then about the strategies. How do you use those strategies, such as building relationships, play, encouraging positive behavior, and establishing routines? How do you use those at home to help increase positive behavior and decrease challenging behavior with young kids? Okay, so we're going to start with what is PBIS? Sometimes, unfortunately, in the field, there's lots of acronyms. So PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Intervention and Support. So it's really a positive approach to behavior interventions. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about what that means. Okay, so this is a slide that I share in staff training, okay? But the goal of PBIS is so important, okay? We want to promote kids' success, okay, by creating an environment where every kid wants to come to school. We're going to design an environment that promotes child engagement and focus on teaching kids what to do. That includes expectations and routines and skills that kids can learn in place of challenging behavior. So, what exactly is PBIS in preschool? So, there are some components we're going to go over quickly before we get into how does this work for you guys at home. So, expectations. Every individual Easter Seals program, because you don't know if you guys all know, we have programs in throughout southeastern Pennsylvania. So we have Bucks County, we have Montgomery County, we have Philadelphia, and we have Delaware and Chester. Okay, so our individual program buildings all have different program-wide expectations. If you're a new family with us, you may not know them, but they are shared with our families. If you're not sure of your expectations of the building your kiddo's in, ask. You can email me or your classroom teacher, but every building has their own. So an example here is be safe, be kind, be helpful. These are actually the expectations from our EI Center in Philadelphia. So these are like the values of the program, right? What kind of, how do we teach rules and expectations, right? And attach these values to them, right? We're going to talk a lot about the next one, which is a common positive language. Okay, we focus on telling kids what to do. So instead of, stop running, we might say, use your walking feet. Right? And then we tie that back to the expectation. That was so safe. Thank you for using your walking feet in the hallway. Okay? So teaching those values, those expectations through the application of those concrete rules, that common positive language. Okay? Some other examples are quiet voice, keep your hands to yourself, right? So we really want to eliminate a lot of the no, stop, and don't. So a lot of people question when I tell them that about PBIS. Well, shouldn't kids, know, when what they're doing is wrong? My answer to that is yes. We're going to talk a lot about teaching them the expectations, right? We have to teach kids what we expect of them, right? If we go back to that running down the hallway or even running around your house, right? If we say, stop running, right? They might start skipping, hopping, jumping, crawling, right? Around unless we give them a specific direction. Like, remember, I'm going to use walking feet inside, right? So we want to try our best to make sure there's always an expectation on our kids. They always know what's expected of them, okay? And then they also should know what stop and go means, right? But we want to reserve that stop, right, for emergencies, right? If your kids climb into something, they're going to get hurt, please tell them to stop, right? But if all we do all day is say, no, stop, don't do this, right? When we need to use those commands, they're going to be less likely to comply with them, right? So we want to teach the command of stop. We can do that through games and play. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But we want to reserve it for those instances where we really want to need it, right? So, if they're, about to run in the street, we want them to say stop, or they're running away from you on the sidewalk. Right? They're all very appropriate times when we want to use that stop command, right? So what else? What else is PBIS in preschool? We do focus on social and emotional skills and development, right? That goes back to teaching those kids what are those appropriate replacement behaviors, right? And a replacement behavior simply means the appropriate behavior that we can teach them in place of the challenging behavior, right? So we work a lot on being a good friend, right? Turn taking and sharing, right? That's a social emotional skill. And that's a replacement behavior for hitting a friend, taking a toy, right? So if we focus on that replacement of, how can we structure turn taking so that the child knows what's expected, right? So that they know they're going to get their toy back, or we give them a replacement to help them wait, right? We focus on that skill development, right? They'll engage in a challenging behavior less. Okay. Also, like I mentioned before, PBIS in preschool also includes professional development and staff support. We have ongoing training for our staff in every of our Easter Seals divisions. We also do focus on family engagement, including training and group supports. Obviously, this looks a lot different now because of COVID. When we were in person, every division last school year, I don't know, everything melds together. The last real school year we had prior to COVID, every division was having a monthly parent groups, which was amazing. And because of COVID, we've kind of not been doing that as much. We've been doing these webinars, which is great, but we are gonna talk about ongoing smaller groups for families in your divisions. So look for that information as well, because we wanna, include all of our families into what we're doing at school, right? It's so important. I think one of the lessons learned from COVID is just the value of partnering with families, right? Us on the therapy side, on the educational side, have gotten this a window into what it's like to really work with families and to really, do more family coaching rather than just direct teaching with the kids. And it's really cool. I mean, we want to keep those connections, right? So be on the lookout for more division-specific family groups and trainings as well. The last piece I want to talk to you about as far as what PBIS looks like in preschool is our coaching and core leadership teams. All of our classroom teachers have PBIS coaches that help them to implement all these wonderful PBIS strategies in the classroom. We also have PBIS core leadership teams. So I'm going to shout out Bucks County real quick. Sorry if your picture's up there. So our PBIS core leadership teams are comprised of staff and families in our divisions, and they meet monthly to talk about different ways we can support our kids, our staff, our families, different topics and different things to implement that affect the program as a whole. So an example is this picture you see here was right around when COVID hit, and we're like, how can we support our staff, our teachers? So a lot of the core leadership teams did these little photo grids. We sent out it to all of our staff, and we surveyed them on wellness, right? We did a wellness survey, and most of our divisions for families too, just to check in and see what everybody was doing. And then we sent them resources. That's one example of what the core leadership teams can do in each division. We also do talk about, sometimes talk about PBIS policy. We're doing our team implementation plans for the year, right? So things we want to work on in the program over the next year. So this is my little shout out to all my core leadership teams. We love them, and they help us tremendously. But we also want families involved. So if you're on this call and you want to be part of your division's core leadership team, please reach out to me. Email me, or you can email your child's teacher or a therapist. Say, hey, I'm really interested in more information on this, because we really, really value our parents' perspective. Okay, that's my little shout out for our core leadership teams. Now we're going to move into the strategies. So we're going to talk about how can you use positive behavioral supports at home. So I have a quote up here from Yuri Bronfenbrenner, and it says, every child needs one person who is crazy about it. Right? So I want you all just take a second to think about who that one person was for you when you were younger, right? Someone that was like super nurturing, someone you could trust. For me, it was my grandma. She was my person, right? And she passed away almost 10 years ago. But I remember when I was in my 20s, whenever I saw her, I would still jump on her lap, right? So, it's really important for young kids to establish these relationships with the adults in their lives, right? It's important for, everyone to feel like they're connected, right? And I think especially now with COVID and being home, sometimes it can be hard to have these positive relationships when you're in tight quarters with, your kids and other family members. So we're going to talk a little bit about how can we either maintain or build a more positive relationship with our kids. And this is something I have to say. Even me, okay, I'm a behavior analyst. I still have to work on this stuff with my own kids because it's hard. It's really hard when you are the one responsible for your kids' education, their therapies, right? And all the other stuff, keeping them alive, right? So I want to talk to you about using the 5-to-1 ratio. And again, this is a strategy we use in school, but it's also one that I use all the time in my house. So I have the piggy bank graphic up there for you because I think it's important when we're talking about this ratio that we talk about it in context of the piggy bank, okay? So the 5-to-1 ratio, what it means is for every one correction, redirection, every time you have to discipline or correct your child's behavior, okay, you should have 5 positive interactions to make up for that one. Okay, the 5-to-1 ratio. And this ratio actually came from marriage research from John Gottman. And he did studies on married couples and he would analyze their conversations. And he would tally the positive to negative interactions that they had. And he was able to, by making these tallies and seeing what percent of positive versus negative statements they said to each other, he could predict what relationships would end or marriages would end in divorce. And he did this with amazing, I think it was 97% accuracy when going ahead 5 years. So 5 years later, with 97% accuracy, he had predicted which marriages would end in divorce based on this ratio. So this ratio, the 5-to-1 ratio, was the best ratio for stable, happy couples. I think the ratio for the ones that end in divorce was negative. It was negative the 0.08 to 1. So there was more negative interactions than positive. Right? So that's the history of the 5-to-1 ratio. But so what does that mean to us? How can we possibly do this, right? Because it sounds hard, right? It sounds hard. Think about how many times you have to redirect or correct your kid throughout the day, right? How can you give them positive interactions 5 times that amount? So I'm going to tell you how you can do it. So we're going to envision that everybody has this bank, this piggy bank. Okay, and every time you have a positive interaction, it's money in the piggy bank. Okay, so let's think about us first, because this applies to us too, parents, adults, right? So you have a piggy bank, right? And positive interactions fill your bank, right? So I love doing these family trainings, right? So this is filling my bank right now. Okay. When my little one comes home and I get hugs and kisses, that fills my bank, right? Positive interactions, right? When my son comes home from school and says he misses me, that fills my bank, right? So tangible things can fill your bank too, right? Well, physically, right? So even paychecks, right? That makes you feel good. It's a positive interaction. You have some money. Tomorrow's Friday. That's filling my bank, right? So that's great. We fill our banks with positives, but the negatives are withdrawals, guys, okay? So you're trying to fill your bank with positives, but then, COVID, quarantine, testing, I don't know what else. The kid doesn't sleep, right? Potty training. Hey, I'm going to do a webinar on that too. Keep an eye out in the spring. But, all these things take away from our banks, right? They are withdrawals, right? Having a negative interaction with a spouse or a coworker is like withdrawal. Okay? So what happens, okay, when there's no money left? When all the money is going out of your bank, right? You feel like crap, right? You feel depleted. If you're a staff or teacher, maybe you feel burned out, right? So we have to try to fill our banks, right? And there's this emphasis on healthcare, or not healthcare, on self-care, but it's like really in the new year, I'm focusing on wellness, right? Overall wellness, mental health, physical health, emotional or spiritual health, right? Focusing on those things will fill our banks, right? Some people think I'm strange. I'm a bath person. I know, TMI, but I love baths. So if I get a bath, it fills my bank. It kind of resets me. I can read a chapter of my book or go on my phone and, read an article, right? That fills my bank. So we have to do things that refill our banks as parents, as educators, right? Because if we don't, we're going to feel depleted. Now, think about our kids. They're the same, guys. If they don't get their banks full, they're burnt out too. Think about all the withdrawals our kids have, especially the kids that are engaging in therapies, right? Like some of this stuff is hard for them, right? So that is taking money out of the bank, okay? So we have to be really mindful and purposeful when filling their banks, right? So, how do we fill their banks, right? Even just when they wake up in the morning, oh, I'm so happy to see you, good morning. That's filling their banks. Giving them hugs and kisses, that's filling their banks. Playing with them throughout the day, that's all filling their banks, okay? So giving them, rewards and reinforcing their good behavior. Oh, I love how you got dressed. You helped mommy get yourself dressed this morning. Thank you so much. That's filling their banks, okay? So we have to make it a purposeful thing that we do all the time is to fill their little banks because they're going to have withdrawals. Everybody is. But we have to try our best to keep their banks full so they don't get burnt out. They don't melt down, right? So, here are some examples of, ways to give your kids encouragement throughout the day. Simple thank yous. Oh, thank you so much for, helping mommy put your clothes in the hamper, right? What a good problem solver. You were able to figure out how to turn my toy on. Or it was so much fun playing with you. You are super good at taking turns. You are so kind when you shared that toy with your sister. Or thank you for using your inside voice when your sister was sleeping. Oh my goodness. When COVID first hit, when my son was home, his school district is hybrid right now. So he's at school 2 days a week and he's home a couple days. But when we were all home together initially, that was one of my rules. It's like, quiet voice when your sister's sleeping because he would wake her up, right? The baby up in the middle of the day when she's supposed to be napping, right? So we're going to talk about rules and expectations, but they should be specific to your family, right? So give our kids that positive feedback, that encouragement, it's going to fill their bank. So there are some examples for you. So I'm going to have a couple of these slides with some positive parenting tips. So try to fill and refill your kids' piggy bank throughout the day, okay? Use positive comments, encouragement, and have fun with them. Just spending time with them, right? And playing and having fun fills their banks, okay? Especially when we know that, school and therapy sometimes can be hard work. So we need to make it fun. We need to be able to fill their little banks so that they can stay on a good track and continue to make progress. So we're going to talk, I love this picture. The kid's little belly is hanging out. It's so cute. The power of play, following your child's lead. So we're switching gears just a little bit. We're still talking about filling their banks. So kids learn through play, okay? They learn through play. They learn through their environment, at a young age, okay? So we really need to encourage play, right? And even for our kiddos that have a rough time, okay? Some kiddos that maybe have an autism diagnosis or have developmental delays, they might not have age-appropriate play skills, right? And that's okay. You want to follow their lead in play, okay? And I'm going to give you some examples of how we can do that without making it too demanding or stressful for your child. So again, this is one of those parenting tips slides. Again, I'll send you these, the PowerPoint, so you'll have all this information. But so tip 1, we talked about this, following their lead. Wait and watch. See what they're doing first, okay? Because you kind of have to join their little bubble, right? So see what they're doing. And then if you want to join, just talk about what they're doing. This is important, especially for our kids that maybe have language delays or haven't developed vocal language yet. Keep talking to them. Talk, okay? Narrate their play. Don't place demands. Let's say I know that there's toys all over my basement and I don't have one in range. But, let's just say my parents will maybe they're playing with cars, right? And you walk over to them. You might just go, vroom, vroom. Oh, that car looks fast, okay? You're not giving them a demand. You're not saying, oh, it's my turn. And you're not, telling them to put the car down the ramp. Not right yet, right? This is just filling their banks and joining them in play, okay? So you're going to talk or narrate what they're doing, okay? Encourage their creativity. Sometimes we don't understand why kids play with toys certain ways. That's why I want you to watch a little bit, right? Encourage their creativity. Watch for cues, okay? If they start looking at you and smiling, right? They want you to come join them, right? Get closer. Maybe then you can work on some turn taking. Oh, mommy wants a turn with that. Can I try? Right? Watch for those cues. If they start backing up as you get closer, then just hang back and keep watching, right? And just talk about what they're doing. That's enough for right now, right? Because you're still giving them a language. You're still exposing them to all of those different words and language about what they're playing with. Right? And that's still so super important. We want to avoid power struggles. So we talk a lot about this with staff, okay? So how do we avoid power struggles in young kids? The biggest power struggle is taking away toys, right? You literally don't want to get in a tug of war with a toy, okay? So that's why I said, if we're working on filling their banks, and if they're not really interested in you joining them, then just hang back. You'll get there. It might take some time. It might take days or weeks of you just sitting and narrating their play before they want to let you in to what they're doing. Because when we're doing turn taking, we do a lot of countdowns. I know some families we work with are probably yeah, do it all the time, right? So it's mommy's turn in 3, 2, 1. And then you want to say, give me, and you'll come to hand over the toy, okay? In a perfect world, right? But it can happen, right? It can happen. And using those simple phrases, giving them some warnings, right, will help to avoid some of that power struggle. So try to avoid that in play. And then last one, have fun, right? Like the kids know when like you're having fun and when you're not. I know when my son got to be a certain age, like all the like superhero stuff, like I love superheroes, but he would like fight and like battle, and I'm like not into it. And he like knew, right? Like I wasn't like fully brought into what he was doing. So my husband plays all that with him, like, so have fun. So I'd be like, let's play birthday party. So have fun, incorporate things that you like into their play if they're open to it, right? So some tips for play. This will fill their banks, guys. Okay, it'll fill their banks, not giving a ton of demands, just following these tips and joining them, encouraging the play that they're engaging in. And you can always model too, because I know sometimes it does bother us if our kids are not engaging with the toy the way it's supposed to, right? So if I have a car, this is my pencil, it's actually a car, and I'm just like spinning its wheels, all right? And you come and join your child, and you're like, oh, I really want to just tell them to play with the car on the ground, but I know that's going to upset them. So maybe you just go over, say, oh, look, mommy found her own car. I'm going to play with it on the track, vroom, vroom, right? And you're just modeling that appropriate play for them, right? And that is awesome. That is really, really helpful too, right? Okay. All right, so here we are. We are at our first Q&A break. So if you have any questions and you haven't already, put it in the chat, in the Q&A. Put them in the Q&A. Brianna, is there anything in there so far?
There are no questions in the Q&A right now.
All right, great. Thank you. So if you guys start to have questions, like you can take a minute. Put any in there. You can type them in the chat or in the Q&A. And then as we keep going, if questions arise, just throw them in there. Okay, there's no silly questions. All right, I'm gonna go to the next slide. If any questions come in, we will have one more opportunity for a Q&A break. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. I put a quote up here from Heminer, Ostrowski, and Fox. So research tells us that kids are less likely to engage in problem behavior when they know what to do, how to do it, and what is expected. Okay? So we want to encourage positive behavior by telling kids what to do, setting those expectations for them. So instead of focusing on the negative, right, we are going to focus on the positive. So if they are running, instead of saying no running, we can say walking feet, okay? Instead of saying stop yelling, we can say, oh, it's your inside voice. We have used voice volume charts in some of our programs too. So if your child, if you want to teach them voice volume, I can send you guys a nice little visual for that too. We have animal voices that we've used in other programs, like cat voice, mouse voice, and lion voice. And that's a good tool to use as well. Hitting. This is a big one, right? That parents get concerned about. They're hitting siblings or you, right? We want to teach them hands to yourself or hands down, okay? And sometimes too, if they're in, all of our staff do go through training about, what to do if a child becomes, aggressive, and we always tell staff just back away. Back away. If a kid, especially a young kid is going at you to hit, take some steps back, right? Maybe you don't need to say anything right now, right? We don't want to give a lot of attention, right, to that behavior. And if we want to redirect, we can say, oh, put your hands down or keep your hands to yourself, okay? Make sure to give them a clear expectation. And then crying. So kids cry for a variety of reasons. So one thing we're not going to talk a lot about today is emotional literacy. And that is something that we talk a lot about in program and in even within our virtual sessions with kids, right? And part of that is just labeling their feelings. So if a kid's upset and crying, you can say, "Oh, I see you're sad," right? I'm sorry you're upset, right? We want to validate their feelings, right? Because even if we don't understand why they're upset, right, feelings can't be wrong, right? So I might feel one way about something, and you might feel another way, right? But right, feelings can't be wrong. It's just how we're feeling, right? So maybe we don't have to say anything. We can just say, "Oh, I see you're upset. I'm sorry," right? And even if something might not be able to be changed, right? Sometimes cleanup can be like the end of the world for kids, right? So you're like, "Oh, it's time to clean up. Let's sing the cleanup song." And even if you're making it fun, you're singing, you're helping them clean up, they still might get upset. And you can say, "I'm sorry that you're sad. I see you're upset, but it's time to clean up our toys. We'll play them again later after lunch," right? So give them some reassurance about maybe why they can engage in that activity again, if that's the reason they're crying, right? If your child does have the ability to communicate via vocal language or with pictures or sign language, you can always say, "Tell me, what's wrong? What do you need?" Right? Asking an open-ended question. Or even show me. Some kids can lead you to what they want, right? Show mommy what you need, right? And a lot of kids, that's the way they get their point across. Okay, so instead of that stop crying, don't cry, use a functional alternative of asking them to help express what they need. So make your expectations clear, okay? I really want to reiterate this. Tell your kids what to do instead of what not to do. We want to clearly and simply state what you expect of them and make sure you're using age-appropriate expectations and language, right? So for some kids that might be maybe a little bit older, they might be able to do multiple steps. Like for my son, he's 6. So I can say, "All right, we're going to get ready to go. Go get your shoes, put them on, and grab your jacket," right? So for him, he can do that, right? But for a younger kid, even a 2 or 3-year-old, right, or a child that might, have a developmental delay, you might just say, "It's time to go, walk to the door," right? Or "It's time to go, get your shoes," and point to their shoes, right? So make sure your expectations are age appropriate, okay? Especially if you have kids of multiple ages, right? Like I'll say it like, "All right, it's time to go. Let's everyone get their shoes and jackets." To my son, he can get that. And then my little one, I can say, "Okay, come with mommy. We're going to get shoes on. Come with me." So that's her expectation, right? So make sure your expectations and your directions are clear, concise, and age appropriate. Know what's reasonable. We have to know our kids' abilities and limitations. Because here's the thing. Expecting too much or too little can lead to frustration. Okay? So we have to know that sweet spot of, I'm going to push them, but not too much, right? And then try to keep your expectations realistic. Remember, we want our kids to be successful. We want them to be able to follow our instructions so we can give them the positive feedback so we can fill their banks, right? If we keep our bar too high, right, and they're never meeting our expectations, that's just withdrawals, withdraw, right? So we have to keep our expectations realistic, give them positive feedback for following those rules and expectations, and then slowly, right, increase the level of of challenge that we're presenting to them, right? Make the expectation a little bit more, a little bit harder as they are successful. All right, so here are some examples. So we have rules at school, right? We have classroom rules that fall under those expectations, right? Of be safe, be kind, be helpful, or whatever the individual divisions expectations are that your child's in. But we should have rules for at home too. So here are some examples. It might be clean up after yourself, use an inside voice, ask before you use something that's not yours, use words to solve problems. Maybe that's for an older kid, okay? Maybe a 5-year-old. And then I have an example with pictures. Okay, these are just board maker pictures, but there's lots of applications that you can use, and your kids' teams can totally help to make visuals. Some of the teams I've been working with are like the teachers and therapists are like visual masters, and they will just make these and laminate them for you. But it's nice to have set rules for at home. And even if you think, well, my kid's not going to understand that, use the visual. Okay, use the visual and pair it with the directions. Let's use the cleanup as an example. Okay, so there's a little picture for cleanup. Say, oh, it's time to clean up your toys. You're going to say it. You're going to point to the picture, right? And then you're going to help them to clean up, right? And then every day you're going to use that, right? And eventually they will make that association between the language of clean up toys and the picture for cleanup. Okay, we're going to talk about schedules and routines in a little bit, but pictures are great tools for teaching kids those steps in a routine too. But set rules for home and be consistent. Just like we said with, the rules in our classrooms. We use a common positive language. Use the same language across everybody in the house, right? So we know the rules are, we keep a calm body, we ask for help, and we take turns, right? Keep the language consistent, pair it with that visual if you need to, and the kiddos will learn them, right? They will. We even have songs and stuff at school. We have songs for the rules, right? There's literally a song for everything. Shout out to our music therapists. They are awesome. But you can always make up, a little song, right? So make it fun, set some rules, right? And it will help to keep those expectations consistent at home. So you don't have to use fancy board maker or lesson picks or one of those websites. You can literally take a picture with your phone, okay, to teach the rules. Okay, so an example of a kid throwing something in the trash. Okay, take a picture of what you want your kid to do, right? So if the rule is clean up, take a picture of them cleaning up, and then tomorrow when it's time to clean up, say, oh, look, remember yesterday you did such a good job. We're going to clean up again today. Right? And you can just swipe through those pictures. You don't need a fancy app. It says Post-it. You don't have to print them out if they're on your phone. Okay, I'm all about making it simple, right? But the pictures will really, really help. And then model it, right? Especially with cleanup, sometimes we do, mommy's going to do one. No, you do one, right? So you're going to set the expectation. You're going to show them a picture. Oh, time to clean up. Mommy's cleaning up, you're going to do one, and then, oh, now it's your turn, put it in, right? And sometimes we have to, kind of like we talked about before, have realistic expectations. Sometimes my kids trash my basement, right? Like all the toys are out, and there is no way they're cleaning up on their own, right? So I'll put some things away, and then I'll say, okay, I'll tell you a story real quick. I got my daughter, who's not 2, she's like 1.5, almost 1.5, a ball pit for Christmas. And my husband was so mad. He's like, you know what a mess that is going to make with all those balls? I'm like, yeah, but it's so fun. But sometimes I do the balls, or I make it a game with my son. I'm like, oh, let's see who can throw the most balls into the ball pit. right? Like making it fun, modeling it, but kind of minimizing that expectation sometimes, or I'm like, all right, baby's gonna, clean up her little Weeble people. My son's gonna work on the balls, and I'm gonna put away all the action figures, right? So make the expectation one that they can actually do, right? But show them a picture, tell them the expectation, model it, and then look at the last part. Praise, right? So we're going to talk about give them that positive feedback. You're going to fill their blanks. Oh, you cleaned up all those balls. Wonderful. Wonderful job cleaning up. Thank you for following our rules, right? Bring it back to those rules, okay? So really be consistent from the expectation through the model to the praise and the follow-up, okay? This is just reiterating what I just said with another cute picture of a kitty up there. So we got to teach them, right? I don't have the quote here, but there's a quote that says, when a kid doesn't know how to read, we teach. They don't know how to, do math, we teach. They don't know how to brush their teeth, we teach, right? If they don't know how to behave, we should teach, right? Why should we do anything different, right? So we have to teach them what to do, show and tell. So tell them what to do, show them how to do it, okay? Practice, practice, practice. Be consistent, have the same expectations, right? Day after day, make your routine as consistent as you can. And then give them that positive feedback. Show and tell. Practice makes perfect. You got it. We're going to switch gears just a little bit to talk about establishing a routine and using visual schedules. So all of our classrooms as part of PBIS have some sort of visual schedule. So whether it's one for the whole classroom or individual ones for the kids, we use them to teach the routine, okay? So I give you some examples here, and one is like a morning routine, and one is specific to brushing teeth. So these can be made for the whole day. They can be made for parts of your day, but again, it helps to set an expectation. Okay, so morning routine, bathroom, breakfast, take your meds, grooming. I might change that to like brush your hair, brush your teeth, and then get dressed. Okay, or maybe you're gonna work just on brushing teeth. Right? So wet your toothbrush, toothpaste on, brush teeth, spit, and rinse. Okay? So for things like hand washing, right? We have these visuals all over our bathrooms, right? For toilet training, again, we use visuals for those steps. So these can be really, really helpful to teach those routines. Okay? Again, your teams can help, right? We can print, we can laminate, whatever you need, we can get them ready for you guys. Timers is another really, really great tool that will help to transition from one step to the next, okay? An example, especially if they're going from like a really preferred thing, like let's say they love breakfast, like, oh, breakfast, now I have to take my meds. Wonderful. They might not like doing that, right? So setting a timer, especially for those kids that just like will like graze on morning. All right, we're gonna have 20 minutes for breakfast. Then breakfast's over, we're gonna take meds, we're gonna get dressed, and then maybe add something fun at the end of that one. Like maybe you get like a song, or maybe you get to play with toys, right? But timers are a great tool to help kids transition from kind of like a more preferred activity to one they might not like so much, right? And then choices. So within these routines, we want to offer choices, okay? So I always tell the story of a kid that I worked with, and he just flat out refused their afternoon routine in the classroom. And it was like because he loved going outside. So it was coming in from the playground, and then he would just refuse. He would drop to the ground. He would cry. He didn't. And the thing was interesting because it was snack time, and he liked snack, but he was just so upset and so distraught that we had to come in from outside. So I'm like, what can we do? He responded really well to choices. I said, great. We are going to give him a choice at every single piece of this routine, from coming in from outside to going into the classroom. So he used, at the time, a walker to help him. And so we made him little parking spots. Okay, where are we going to park your walker? And we would have him park it. And then that was his first choice. Then he came in the classroom and we'd say, okay, do you want to wash your hands or pick your seat for snack? Right? So he would get to pick what he wanted to do. Okay. And then go, okay, if he picked his seat, great. Okay, we're going to put your placemat down now. Do you want to go get your lunch bag or go wash your hands? And it was a choice at every piece. Every step was a choice. And because it wasn't someone just giving him demand after demand after demand, he complied, right? And it sounds like, oh, how exhausting giving so many choices, but it wasn't forever, right? It was for a couple days, right? And then he got a hang of the routine. He saw there was flexibility in the routine, and he was able to get through that routine without having any challenging behavior, right? So offering choices throughout these routines, getting dressed, picking out choices of clothing, bath time. I let my son sometimes pick toys to go on the bath, dinner. I often make a couple of vegetables because I'm they're more likely to eat one if I say, do you want broccoli or carrots, right? They're picking one regardless, right? But for kids, it seems less demanding. They have more control when they can make a choice, right? So for all of these routines, right, can you offer a choice? And maybe for everything, there's not always going to be a choice. That's life. But for the activities that we can give a choice, let's try, right? Even the cleaning up. Do you want to clean up the ball pit or the action figures, right? Either way, they're helping clean up, okay? So think about how you can use that strategy as well. Make sure that they're reasonable. You're the one making the decision about the choice, okay? So if I'm not making French fries, mashed potatoes, and hair ties, I'm not doing all three of those. So that is not going to be your choice, right? But it's easy for me to pick out two different shirts out of the drawer and say, red shirt or blue shirt, right? They're still picking a shirt and they can pick one, right? Seating arrangements, that's always a big one. Can you give them a choice? I mean, every night it's musical chairs in my dining room table. It's okay, you sit next to mommy, daddy, or baby? And my son gets to pick, okay? Either way, he's staying down for dinner, but giving him the choice makes him more likely to comply with that demand, okay? And then we're gonna talk a little bit about first, then statements for directions. This is another strategy we use a lot in program. And really, it's just stating what you want the kid to do, probably the lesser preferred activity, okay? And then giving them what they're going to get, what the good thing's going to be, right? Following the compliance of that first task, okay? It's using the PREMAC principle, right? The kiddo is more likely to engage in a non-preferred activity when it's directly followed with a preferred, okay? So a really functional example is first put on your shoes, then we're going outside, okay? If the kid likes outside, that will be motivation enough to go put their shoes on, right? Okay, some other examples. First pick up toys, then snack. Okay, or first get dressed, then play. Okay, simplify. Okay, depending on where your child's at, you don't have to use all this language. Okay, make it short, make it sweet. You can use a visual. Here are some examples. If you want a first then board for at home, let us know. We can give you some. Actually, there are some links at the back of this presentation that we can throw in the chat for you. Where if you have a printer at home, you want to print it out yourself and laminate, you can do that. But for real, guys, ask your classroom team. We do not mind making these for you, okay? And then you'll have the picture, like first numbers, then the ball bounce game, okay? So the numbers is the non-preferred activity. The ball bounce is the preferred, okay? So use a visual, use that first, then language. And again, the kiddo will be more likely, to engage in that non-preferred task or activity. Oh, talking a lot. So, catch your child being good. We're kind of going to end this conversation where we started. Filling those kids' banks, okay? We want to use positive reinforcement to increase the likelihood of that positive behavior is going to occur, okay? So what does that mean? That means positive reinforcement is something that's given after a behavior that makes that behavior more likely to occur in the future. So if our kid loves our praise and attention, and we are constantly saying, oh, I love how you're cleaning up, buddy, wonderful, wonderful job. If that is valuable for him, that praise and attention, he is going to be more likely to clean up, okay? That behavior is going to increase. But if our praise and positive attention isn't valuable, you might not see that behavior change. And that's where I think we get kind of caught up because you're like, oh, I'm praising them, I'm giving them this positive feedback, but the behavior's not changing, okay? So you don't want to stop, right, giving that specific positive attention for those appropriate behaviors. But we might also have to identify what else does the kid like that we can use as a reinforcement, right? So just like we talked about the first end, finding those things that like maybe they like bouncing on a trampoline, right? So we're going to say, okay, first we're going to clean up, then we can bounce on the trampoline, right? So trampoline is a way until cleanup time is done, right? So we'll clean up all the toys, and we'll say, oh, mommy loves how you cleaned up. Let's bounce. Okay, so you're still going to use that positive praise. You're going to catch them being good. You're going to give them something they like, right? That's the whole point of positive reinforcement. Give them something they like to increase the likelihood that positive behaviors will continue to occur and occur more often. Okay, so it's another example for this little cutie down there. Wow, you're being so careful keeping the pieces on the table. Even if you have multiple kids at home, right, and you're like, I'm just kind of in the midst of this madness, right, just call out when you see them doing something good. Start there, right? So catch them being good, call that out, find out things that are reinforcing for them. All right, so I love this picture. I found it. I don't know what I Googled to find it, but I found it. But we're parenting during a pandemic, right? This is hard, guys. This is hard. Like I said, even for me, who's trained in the field of behavior, it is a decision that I have to be mindful about every day to give my kids this positive feedback, right? To fill their piggy banks, to try to keep the expectations clear and consistent, to provide choices, right? I know it's hard. Just do your best. I want to end with sharing this graphic. That this was actually from NCPMI, the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. But I love this. It's like, how do we stay calm? This is for us, okay? This is strategies for parents. So stay calm, connect, and reflect. Take some deep breaths. I literally was just telling Brianna and Dakota before we started that I have my lavender diffuser set up next to me. But take some deep breaths, okay? Maybe use a positive affirmation. I can do this, right? Or I have patience. Just tell yourself, right, something positive. Label your kids' feelings. That's your connect. I see you're upset right now. Mommy's upset too. Right? Everybody has feelings. Reassure them it's okay. Like, it's all right, bud. And then look for opportunities. Catch them being good, right? If they are just having a rough day, guys, just try to catch one thing they're doing right and give them some positive attention for it, okay? And then reflect. Just think about your day, right? Like, what were they feeling? What was that behavior trying to tell me? And next time they do that, is there something I can do differently? Like maybe tomorrow I'll switch my schedule around and we're gonna, do our morning, we'll have, some iPad time after our morning routine, right? Think about how you can change your activities, do something different, right? So that you're giving them something they like after something that's hard. That might help, right? And then going back to the calmness, remember why you love your kids. I mean, it sounds silly, but, they can give us a run for our money some days. So, think positive thoughts about them and then do some counting, some deep breaths. You can do it. It's hard, but, with using a couple of these strategies, it can get easier. So I did want to have time for any questions that you guys might have. Was there anything in the Q&A, Brianna?
Yes, there actually was a question from the chat.
Okay.
The question was, if they are attempting to hit their head and it is unsafe, any thoughts on how to handle this appropriately and safely?
Yeah, so we do see kiddos that have self-injurious behavior in some of our programs. So the first thing you want to do is ensure safety, right? So depending on if they're hitting it on a surface, forward or backwards, kind of if you can block them from making contact, right? We use cupped palms a lot at Easter seals, but try to prevent their head from making contact. If they're close to a wall, maybe try to scooch them like behind their shoulders, scooch them away from the wall. Or maybe you're going to bring over some pillows, flatter pillows or a mat. Okay, to try to put it on the ground. So if they are give them a safe space if they're flailing and hitting their head. So safety's first. But secondly, stay neutral. Okay, because I think a lot of the times what we do is we say, oh, don't hit your head. That's not safe. Just try to stay neutral, right? Block, stay neutral. If they start to calm down, you see signs, you can say, oh, mommy's sorry you were sad, label that feeling, and then try to redirect to a calm and neutral activity, okay? And then if you try it and they start hitting their head again, just back off, right? And it's kind of what we call the wait strategy, where it's you keeping them safe. If you see signs of de-escalation, you can attempt to redirect them to an activity, but if they start to escalate again, you're going to back off, okay? We really want to make sure that what we're doing isn't increasing challenging behavior, isn't escalating their behavior. That's kind of the kiddos giving cues that, no, I don't want to do that, I'm not ready for that. And especially with self-injurious behavior, we want to make sure two things. Number one, we're keeping them safe, but also we are not making it reinforcing, right? So we're not going to give them their most preferred thing, which a lot of times, unfortunately, it's our parenting go-tos are the things they like, right? So we don't want to pull out the iPad or put on their favorite song when they're engaging in self-injurious behavior or any challenging behavior, because what is that doing? It's reinforcing it, right? So I want to be really mindful about what calming strategies that we're using, so not to reinforce the self-injury, but stay neutral, help the child to de-escalate, and then re-engage in an appropriate activity. But I would say too, if you are seeing that frequently, if you have a behavior specialist, like one of us on your team, talk to us about it, right? We can help, we can model, we can, talk about specific strategies. If you don't have a behavior specialist on your team, talk to your teacher, right? All of our teachers are also trained in PBIS and all of our crisis de-escalations, and we can help walk you through some of this. Hope that was helpful.
Danielle, there's also another question. This question says, if choices do not work, but the child is just sitting and not tantruming, being destructive, is it okay just to walk away until they come to you? Then should I have them finish the activity of the choices?
Oh, so if you give a choice and they don't pick one, so if you're like, oh, do you want to play blocks or cars, and they don't pick one, I would say you can pick one for them. Say, oh, or give them another choice, right? It depends what your expectation is. Like at home, you have more flexibility, right? When we're in school and it's like, let's say it's tabletop time, right? We want them to pick one. So if we say, do you want to play puzzle or, pop twos, and they don't pick, we're going to give them one. We can say, okay, Miss Danielle's going to pick, how about a puzzle, right? We're going to pick one for them. But it's really up to you at home. If you give a choice in activity, they don't pick one, what should you do, right? If you want them to engage in activity, if it's time to do an activity, then pick one for them. If you're working on something like requesting, right, you want to work on their motivation, right? So you might just pick something different and say, oh, they're really not interested in that. So how about, do you want to blow bubbles or play cards, right? Give them another choice just to kind of gauge their interest to what they're kind of motivated to engage in. I would try not to leave them with no expectation, right? If you present a choice, they don't pick anything, and you don't really want to just leave them with nothing to do, because what happens when you leave kids with nothing to do? They find something to do, right? A lot of times they're finding something to do is challenging behavior, climbing on something, grabbing something, right? So I would say always have some expectation, right? So even if they don't pick an activity, maybe you're just gonna have a couple toys out for them and say, okay, buddy, it's playtime. If you don't want these toys, mommy's gonna leave, the big Duplo box over here and some balls over here for you to play with while mommy takes her call, right? So always have something as an expectation. Any other questions, Brianna?
There's one more. I think it's more program specific. It says, do you help staff with charter students as well?
Yes, we definitely can. Right, our behavior specialists are for all of our divisions, but we do have other school-age kids that we support. So yes, we can. We can definitely help, even if it's informally, right? So even if we're not on the kiddos case or IP, we can definitely help brainstorm with any of the therapists or teachers. Was that it, Brianna?
That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I know we went over a lot, but just pick one thing at a time, okay? There's a lot going on, right? There's a lot going on in our world. So, sometimes hearing a lot of information can be challenging. So just pick one new thing to do. Whether it's like, I'm just going to work on giving my kid positive feedback tomorrow. Wonderful, right? Or I'm going to set an expectation, for playtime, okay? Just pick one thing at a time. You can do it. It's hard work, but you guys can totally do this. Here are some resources for you. We do have an Easter Seals blog. Here's that NCPMI website. It has a ton of nice resources. Like I said, the first then boards and visual schedule resources are there as well. You want to print them out yourself, you can do that. That is it, you guys. So I'm going to stop sharing. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you to our moderators.